I woke up to the smell of burning oil and the sight of a goddamn bonfire in my front yard. Except it wasn't a bonfire. It was my tractor, Bessie, my beautiful, hard-working Bessie, now a flaming sacrifice to the Homeowners Association, which, until this very moment, I had only considered a minor nuisance. I stood there, barefoot in the damp grass, my robe flapping in the morning wind as I watched the last 20 years of rust, grease, and good memories turn to smoke. And on the sidewalk, a small group of smugly grinning HOA members whispered among themselves as if they had just done the neighborhood a favor. At the front of them all stood their queen, arms folded over her obnoxiously expensive blazer, her expression twisted into something between fake sympathy and sheer arrogance. Margaret Caldwell, the self-appointed ruler of Ashwood Estates. She looked at me as if I were a stray dog that had just soiled her marble floors. "This is what happens, Mr. Walker," she said, her voice dripping with the artificial kindness of someone who enjoys delivering bad news, "when people refuse to follow community guidelines." My fingers curled into a fist. Not because I was the kind of man who solved problems that way. I wasn't, but because the rage boiling inside me had nowhere else to go. The other HOA members shifted uncomfortably as I took a step forward, my eyes locked onto Margaret's. "You burned my tractor." My voice was calm, but the weight of the words could have crushed steel. Margaret blinked, then forced a smile. "It was a community decision. You were given ample opportunity to remove that eyesore from your yard. We enforce aesthetic harmony in Ashwood, and unfortunately, you left us no choice." A slow breath escaped me. My heart pounded, but my mind was already moving. Past the flames, past the smell of burning rubber and gas, past the smug faces of these self-important idiots. I turned on my heel, walked back inside, and shut the door. Not a word. Not a scream. Not a threat. Margaret probably thought she had won, that I had accepted my punishment like a naughty child and would now fall in line. She had no idea she had just declared war. In my office, I reached into an old storage chest. Dust rose as I lifted the lid, revealing a neatly folded uniform, a badge, and a thick binder of fire codes. A slow grin spread across my face. Because while these HOA clowns thought they were above the law, they had no idea who they had just crossed. I had spent 30 years as a fire marshal, and I knew one universal truth. Every neighborhood HOA is a fire hazard waiting to happen. And now? Now I was about to make their lives hell. It all started 3 weeks earlier when I first got the letter, a nicely typed, pretentious little notice with the HOA's stupid tree logo in the corner. "Dear Mr. Walker, as a resident of Ashwood Estates, you are required to comply with all community guidelines set forth by the Homeowners Association. We have noticed several violations on your property, including, but not limited to, an unauthorized, dilapidated agricultural vehicle parked in public view, failure to maintain aesthetically pleasing landscaping by neighborhood standards, repeated failure to register as an HOA member despite multiple invitations. Please remit the attached membership fee and ensure compliance with all HOA regulations by the end of the month. Failure to do so will result in escalating enforcement measures. Sincerely, Margaret Caldwell, HOA President." I had laughed out loud. I wasn't a member of the HOA. I had lived here before there was an HOA. My land, my house, my rights. This whole nonsense about escalating enforcement measures sounded like a toddler throwing a tantrum with a thesaurus. I had ignored the letter. Then they started sending more, slipping them under my door, sticking them to my truck's windshield. One time, I even found one taped to my dog. Then they started showing up in person. Margaret, along with her enforcer, Richard Holloway, a walking, talking suburban nightmare who took his role as compliance officer a little too seriously, came to my porch one Saturday afternoon, standing like they were about to perform an exorcism. "Mr. Walker," Margaret said in her very best "I'm being patient, but not really" tone. "I assume you've received our notices." "I have," I said, leaning against the railing as I sipped my beer. "Didn't read him." Her nostrils flared just a little. Richard cleared his throat. "You are in violation of multiple HOA policies, sir." He gestured to my yard like a crime scene investigator presenting evidence. "Your lawn exceeds the allowed blade height by 2 inches. Your mailbox is not regulation standard, and that," he pointed dramatically at Bessie, is an unregistered agricultural vehicle. I stared at him. It's a tractor. Richard huffed. It does not meet aesthetic standards for a modern residential area. I took another sip. Aesthetic standards? We live in a town where someone built a 12-foot metal chicken in their front yard. That's art, but my tractor is an abomination. Margaret pursed her lips. Mr. Walker, if you do not join the HOA and comply with its regulations, we will be forced to take action. I had waved them off, laughing. And now? Now, Bessie was a pile of ashes. The flames had died down, but the rage inside me hadn't. I spent the afternoon gathering evidence. I took photos. I checked my security cameras. I documented everything. Because while they thought this was some petty little neighborhood dispute, I knew exactly what laws they had just broken. Arson, property damage, harassment, conspiracy. I placed a call to an old friend at the fire department. I need a formal fire safety inspection of Ashwood Estates, I said. Silence. Then, something going on, Walker? Let's just say, I murmured, staring out at the charred remains of my tractor. Some folks here haven't been playing by the rules. I had spent my career putting out fires. Now, I was about to start one. The next morning, the fire department rolled into Ashwood Estates like a biblical reckoning. Trucks lined the streets as uniformed officials took notes, measured hydrant distances, and marked hazards with bright red stickers. Margaret stormed outside, demanding answers. Captain Riley just flashed his badge. Formal inspection. Step aside, ma'am. That's the thing about fire code violations. There's no debate. No appeals process. When something's a hazard, it gets fixed, or the city shuts you down. And Ashwood? Oh, it was one giant, overpriced fire hazard. Richard tried to slink away, but I caught him before he could make it to his car. You know, I said casually, leaning against the driver's side door. Arson's a pretty serious crime. His face twitched. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on the security footage. The color drained from his face. I smiled. I do. Margaret resigned that night. The HOA dissolved within a week. And Ashwood Estates? It finally became a place worth living in.